Hey everybody, welcome back to the Court of Random Opinion. My name is Lauren Neidigh. Last night we had a couple of docket updates in the Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively legal saga, including Jed Wallace's amended complaint against Blake Lively in the Texas court. As promised, I'm here to give you a quick recap with just a few key points. We'll also talk briefly about Marvel's motion to quash Justin Baldoni's subpoena, which dropped last night. The overarching themes here in Jed Wallace's amended complaints are going to be relatively the same, basically arguing that the damage was done in Texas, that this belongs in the Texas court, not the New York court, as Blake is trying to get it moved over there. Wallace is explaining how everything in these CRD and draft complaints by Blake Lively became widely known publicly because she, gave it to the press. Now, in theory, someone else could have gotten it and published it, but not on the same day that they had filed it, much less just mere hours later. He's explaining that he and his company were never on the set of the film. They've never met Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni. They know nothing of any harassment. That negativity about Blake Lively in the press predated their involvement at all, as it started in July, and Jed Wallace and Street were signed on sometime in August. Yet she found it appropriate to name him in the CRD complaint and the draft complaint, so that Jed Wallace and his company were brought into this when it hit the media. And then interestingly, she did not actually name him in the lawsuit when it was filed. So she went ahead and dragged him through the mud, didn't even list him as part of her lawsuit initially. Then she tried to file against him in Texas so that she could take his deposition, basically because she actually doesn't have any proof that he did anything that she claimed that he did. We'll take a look at paragraph 9 here. That lawyer filed a lawsuit against Wallace in Hays County, Texas, seeking to take his deposition. Lively represented to the judge under oath that she needed the discovery to understand and evaluate potential claims so that any suit filed by Lively against Wallace is supported by competent witness testimony and evidence, and swearing that without this evidence, any lawsuit against Wallace would be groundless and in bad faith or for harassment or improper purpose. In other words, she sought from a Texas judge in Texas evidence from a Texan to support her false claims in the CRD and draft complaints targeting, as to Wallace and Street, Texas residents. What happened next is remarkable. Without waiting for the Texas judge to rule, and accordingly, without taking Wallace's deposition, Lively dismissed her Texas lawsuit falsely, actually preposterously, claiming to the court that Baldoni's lawyer in a hearing in the New York case suggested that she do so. And then, without any evidence and knowing, obviously, that neither Wallace nor Street had sexually harassed her or retaliated against her for publicizing the allegations or breached a contract with her, no such contract exists, she joined Wallace and Street in the New York complaint as defendants, claiming that Wallace and Street relations intentionally violated Miss Lively's rights under the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, acting with malice, oppression, and fraud. She added in the New York case that Wallace and Street acted despicably, maliciously, fraudulently, and oppressively in the wrongful intention of injuring Miss Lively. She branded Wallace as evil, claiming he had no regard for the rights or safety of Lively and others, and intentionally caused her extreme emotional distress. And this is where it got really interesting to me. They bring in a couple of instances that have kind of taken place in the online sphere of all this. As you know, our friend Colonel Kurtz went and did a peaceful protest at South by Southwest when Blake was there to promote Another Simple Favor. Lively, accompanied by her publicists Leslie Sloan and Jamie Candell, appeared at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, where, on information and belief, she made additional false and defamatory remarks of and concerning the plaintiffs. Specifically, when confronted by a Texas resident who stated that Blake lies and referenced justice for Justin, Lively never admitted that her statements were false, but rather allowed her lies to stand, thus defaming plaintiffs by, at the very least, implication. On information and belief, while in Austin, Lively made additional defamatory remarks concerning plaintiffs. Discovery will reveal the extent of those statements. And you guys remember the incident at the hotel where the girl said that Blake had stalked her to her car and took a video of her and all that after she had apparently waited in the lobby of the hotel for Blake to get there because somebody in the staff had told her that Blake Lively was going to show up, and she said, she wanted to video it. That gets mentioned here in paragraph 15. It says, during her stay in Texas, Lively also traveled to Waco to visit Chip and Joanna Gaines' hotel, and while there, engaged in a confrontation with a young girl who was attempting to take Lively's photograph. On information and belief, Lively made additional defamatory comments about plaintiffs, purposefully availing herself of the Texas forum. Discovery will reveal the extent of those remarks. What's interesting there is so they're talking about a confrontation with a young girl who was attempting to take Lively's photograph. That's not exactly what happened with the girl who was, taking the video in the lobby. So I'm wondering if something else happened and then somebody tipped off these lawyers like, hey, this is what happened and she said this or whatever. But I mean, it's possible, I suppose. They're not very specific here. But the reason it seems to be referencing the girl on TikTok who we, covered that whole saga is that all happened at Chip and Joanna Gaines' hotel. Unless something else went down there, which is entirely possible. I guess that's what they're referencing, but we'll have to wait and see. But in last night's live stream, when we went over the whole document together, a couple of things happened that I want to bring up here. First of all, I made a joke that some people did not understand, and usually I just delete these kinds of comments, but when somebody's being, nice and genuinely misunderstands, I do try to explain just so people, don't feel upset. This happened when we were talking about how Blake Lively had blasted Jed Wallace's private medical condition to the public through her filing with the Texas court, even though the New York court had rightfully redacted it. I said something along the line of, congratulations, I know how hard it is to spread something other than legs, to which at least a handful of people became upset because they thought I was slut-shaming her. Listen, I don't care what you do in your free time. I was referring to this, okay? She's literally spreading someone's legs. This is not slut-shaming. Anyways, here's what he had to say about her spreading his medical information like she spread the legs. Worse than the economic toll is the assault on Wallace's emotional condition. Lively has blasted out in court filings, in this case, confidential health information about Wallace, despite this information being sealed in the New York case and in a redacted declaration and in letters marked confidential. Wallace has suffered medical issues induced by Lively's actions. Wallace's stress began on December 20th, 2024, when plaintiff's world was turned upside down from the maliciously leaked CRD complaint and the draft complaint, which made totally false and fabricated allegations against plaintiffs. Such physical manifestations are the strongest evidence of mental anguish damages. Another thing I wanted to bring up today was a slogan that I like to use that people have been asking about, which is assholes are not a protected class in this country. People said I should put that on merch. Well, I have. It's on my online shop here, which, to be honest, I don't use very much. But if you get the white one, you have my little mascot, Captain Scatterbrain, on the back, as well as my username, LethalLauren904. So I might change the back of the shirts. The black one, the blue one, the gray one, they just have the Lethal Lauren 904 on the back. I think I'm going to change that part. And we'll maybe do the Court of Random Opinion logo on it or something. But you can get it there if you want as is. Or I'll probably make like a hat or something with the same thing on it. But the link to this website is going to be in the description of this video. Like I said, it's lethalLauren904.myshopify.com. And you can find some other stuff on there too if you go here. Anyways, I haven't used this website in a while, so I'm going to update it probably today or tomorrow. So maybe, hold out if you want to see what else comes up. But right now, that's what we got. I'm going to see if I can get some cheaper prices there too, because it's a little hard. I've never done like a merch shop before, so I got to look into that. All right. The last thing I want to briefly touch on here today is this letter from Marvel to the judge. They want to quash the subpoena sent by Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties, and for a protective order to protect non-party confidential documents. The Wayfarer parties make brief reference to Nice Pool in their first amended complaint. Specifically, they allege that Reynolds and Lively continued to leave breadcrumbs in their campaign for mocking and bullying Justin Baldoni by including Nice Pool in Deadpool and Wolverine as a vicious caricature of Baldoni. And that scenes with Nice Pool were intended to be transparent and mocking portrayal of Reynolds' warped perception of Baldoni. According to Marvel, the subpoena and documents requests were calling for all documents and communications concerning the creation, development, modification, or portrayal of the character Nice Pool from Deadpool and Wolverine. It also calls for the production of all documents and communications concerning Baldoni. Marvel further understands from a notice provided by Reynolds that the RFPs call for Nice Pool-related documents from Reynolds, and they argue here that they should not have to produce these documents. I'll include a link below to the full letter here as well. One of the things they're saying here is that the claims for defamation and false light have to be based on false statement of fact, and that Nice Pool is a caricature and a mocking portrayal based on Reynolds' perception. So it's clearly a joke and not grounded in any factual basis. But remember that Ryan Reynolds hasn't denied that this was based on Justin Baldoni. So the issue here is not whether or not was Nice Pool based on Justin Baldoni, because we're not stupid. Of course it was. But they're arguing that this is Ryan Reynolds' opinion and perception of Justin Baldoni. And basically they're saying like we haven't done anything like illegal here, like nothing to defame anybody happened here. And so we'll see what the judge says about that. They may, have a point here that there's no false statement of fact. People are allowed to be assholes under a lot of circumstances. That's not illegal, but it can have social consequences, financial consequences if people decide not to support you. And I know I've had people say, like, oh, we're boycotting Marvel. And I've had people say, like, don't do that. That's ridiculous. Or I'm not doing all that. Look, I don't care what you do. Do what you want. I think everyone should do what's right for themselves. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm just here to tell you what I think, which is that this was a dick move, but I'm not sure it's going to have legal consequences. I'm certainly not saying it won't because I'm not a lawyer. But as you guys know, my area is kind of social perception and the kind of day-to-day consequences these actions have. All right, guys, that's it for your recap today. Tomorrow, I'm probably going to do a video talking about Stephanie Jones' attorneys talking to Billy Bush and some of what Brian Friedman had to say to the press after the amended counterclaims were filed the other night. There's some interesting stuff in there. And then I think we'll probably do a members-only stream tomorrow night. I'll put more details of that in a post on my YouTube page and on Twitter. Thanks, everybody.